they may have a vision or an idea, but bigger than that, it's just that belief in themselves, that belief that, you know what, could I really do this? Could I really, really pull this off? And I knew for years that God had a special call and that it was going to be speaking, but I was terrified of it.
Yeah.
And so, it was awful. I could tell you stories. It was awful. And so, but you know what? Still, there was something inside of me that was much bigger. And it was really, one of my favorite, I like to tell people, it's not who you believe in that changes your life forever, but who believes in you. And I was surrounded by people who believed in me. And I'm so grateful for that. Not that you have to have that, but I highly encourage you to that core group of people is huge, but I think the biggest one is just the belief. And the way that I love to encourage people, because that biggest gap that we have in all our lives is that gap between knowing and doing, and just executing and taking a step. And that I like to home in on those. And so I share those strategies with everyone because that's what's going to help you cross that threshold of fear. Because the biggest enemies of your life and my life are procrastination, perfectionism, and comparison. And if we don't go after them with a vengeance, when all those thoughts come in our head, they'll abort our dreams before we get started. So I'm a big person on execution and doing it afraid. And I'm sure that's a common theme that's woven with a lot of entrepreneurs, but that's a great question. You know what? It was a little bit crazy because there was 4 of us, Matt.
Cool.
So, and we were always, I'm the oldest of 4. I have a sister that's 13 months younger, and then a brother and a sister that are 9 and 10 years younger. So there's a little bit of gap. But you know what? I have to say, our dinner table was awesome. Of course, we had the normal spits and spats of any family, but Mom was a full-time mom when we were there. And I don't think I ever appreciated that to the level that I do now. And so Southern cooking, fried chicken, meatloaf, all the Southern food, because we're here in Texas, but and both of my parents are ministers. So you know what? There was just some solid foundations that were laid in those moments together. And whoever cooked didn't do the dishes. So that was one of the things that always happened before and after. A little tradition. But I have to say, overall, it was peaceful. It was probably more, most of my family, no, it's about half and half. Half are outgoing and half are very reserved. So I'm sure those outgoing ones probably manipulated more the conversations, but good memories. Absolutely great memories.
Very cool. And with both your parents being ministers, obviously there's a certain level of entrepreneurialism that you probably were exposed to, from them living their lives and leading, each of their churches in that. Would you agree with that? Is that kind of where you got some of the initial influences to become an entrepreneur, would you say?
Oh, goodness. Absolutely. Absolutely. Kind of in a nutshell, when they kind of jumped into their faith and went all in, Matt, it was like, I think what I honored the most about that was they didn't just dip their toe in the water. They were all in. So, they were dreaming big and doing big and small. And what that looked like, they ended up starting a school and had a little country church that was across the street. And then during that period of time, my mom also became a midwife when they were even unheard of in the state of Texas. So she delivered over 1,000 babies within her 20 years of practice.
Wow.
And talk about pioneering. When there was maybe 2 or 3 in the whole state here. So that's just a small taste, but Mom is a pioneer. She was a professional. She was Miss Rodeo Fort Worth. She was a trick rider. She was a professional photographer. She got her airlines. She flew planes. she became a pastor and a midwife. So very much so that was lived right in front of me. So
Yeah, I
very,
love it.
very inspiring.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. And we'll get to what you're doing today in a few minutes, but obviously, you've been exposed to a lot of different entrepreneurs, a lot of different types of people in all areas of life, right? In all,
Yes.
I guess, facets of business or evolution of their own business.
Mhm.
Do you often see, and maybe you don't even know the answer to this, but do you often see that people that grow up in similar types of situations like you did, maybe had a parent that was,
Mhm.
again, out there doing their own thing?
Mhm.
Do you often see that they, seem to follow the same type of tendency to go out and, try to do their own thing? Do you ever get
You
involved in any
know,
of that, any of those stories?
I do. I think, only because I teach on this, I understand that certain traits of certain kind of personalities are probably have a more tendency to take some risk.
Mhm.
And I think that's a huge thing that you have to really embrace when you step into, being an entrepreneur or pursuing those dreams in your heart, is you're just going to have to do some things that are uncomfortable and scary,
Yeah.
that you're not going to know the outcome. I think for myself, one of my favorite quotes is that people need demonstration more than they need instruction.
Mhm.
And so that was lived in front of me. So I absolutely have to say that that's probably a huge kids growing up in that environment atmosphere and be encouraged to go for it no matter what, that is going to be very cultivating.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
know it was for me. I know it
Yeah.
was for me. I don't think there was one Matt, I came to my parents with some crazy ideas. And I don't think there was ever one day that I ever said, I don't think you're up to it or that you can't do it.
They
Now,
encouraged
had
you.
I
Yeah.
wished that they would probably stop me because I remember when I was younger, Matt, I remember before I left for college, pulling out the phone book when we
Yeah.
had the paper phone books that had
Yeah.
yellow pages. Now, for some people, they've never seen those.
Yeah.
And I remember looking in the business pages and thinking, what do I want to do when I grow up?
Yeah.
I mean, what occupations can I take on? And, went to college and changed my major 5 times. And then one weekend I went to church, and this lady, her name was Kathleen, and she was beautiful. And she showed up that Sunday, and she had American Airlines. She had just become a flight attendant,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
she was all decked out, getting ready to go on a trip. And all I thought to myself, Matt, was, oh my goodness, she gets to dress up. She gets to travel the world and get paid for it at the same time. I think
Mhm.
I'm going to do the same thing. Within 2 weeks, I put in my application for the airlines and became a flight attendant with American.
Yeah.
And it was a great experience. It absolutely was not my calling.
Mhm.
And my parents just backed me in everything. I just wish too that I had insight of how to look into my gifts and how do I look into those callings and those traits and those
Mhm.
strengths that I could probably save quite a few years
Yeah.
instead
Yeah.
of just jumping on that next thing.
And that's
So,
and that's something that obviously, again, we'll get to what you're doing today, but I think that that's a
mhm,
great segue to be able to jump into, how do you identify those callings? How do you know if you're in the right place, or if there's,
mhm,
another thing that you're supposed to be, doing with your life? Any advice? I mean,
mhm,
obviously you've taught this to
mhm.
a lot of people, but what
Right.
would be your insight into that?
Yeah. And backing up just a little bit in that, Matt. So, after that, I just kept I had incredible jobs after that,
Mhm.
in surgical and software sales where it was incredible money. And yet
Mhm.
I was so empty on the inside, and I knew that there was more. And one thing that I discovered is that I had been, and I had actually chosen success over significance.
Mhm.
And, success is something I think that we do more for ourselves, but significance is how we live for others.
Yeah.
And, success can even look good to the world on the outside, but if it doesn't really feel good in our heart, is
Mhm.
it really success at all?
Yeah.
And so, through all the roller coaster rides and going around the mountain, one thing that I really discovered in my journey when I began reinventing my life, um, two principles I got a hold of was that number one, To live differently, I was going to have to really think differently.
Mhm.
And that secondly, I would only become as good as the questions I asked. And so the two questions that I love to share with people that I think are just so imperative are, number one, who am I? And number two, why am I here? And, those aren't supposed to be mysteries. It doesn't have to be that hard. So those were key. And I stuck into those. And it's so funny, as you begin to get hungry, that's when it just seems like the answers begin to come. But I really believe it's through those questions. And so what I teach people, I kind of have a framework that I'm like, if I have 2 hours or if I have 5 days with people, what would it be that I would take them through? And so the first part of that framework is identity. The second part is clarity of purpose and vision. And the third part is execution, because those were the three pieces. Had I known decades before, I could have made a lot quicker headway. Clarity of purpose, of course, we all hunger for that. And that's important because clarity of purpose brings clarity of your priorities and what you're going to put your hand to every day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it's imperative that we back up. That first question is an even more important question. Who am I?
Mm-hmm.
Because until you know who you are you going to be able to know what you're called to do? And you've heard this before, Matt, but it is the truth. And that is that nobody can ever outperform their self-worth. I don't care how many goal-setting sessions that you've been through, how many conferences that you attend, until you know the greatness that resides inside of you and how to tap into that. Are you really going to be able to move into those other places? So that's part of that. An interesting example. My husband and I, when was it? In November, we traveled with John Maxwell, and 200 of us went to the country of Dominican Republic for 5 days.
Mm-hmm.
And for 5 days, I think it was 37,000 leaders that we trained within those 5 days.
Wow.
And all we touched on, Matt, were core values.
Yeah.
Because you can have all the skills and the gifts and the talents and the education in the world, but if you are not grounded in who you really want to become, so that's what we say. It's not about, what is my purpose and what am I called to do? How do I get that answer?
Mm-hmm.
The more important question is, who are you becoming?
Mm-hmm.
So, and it was amazing because we would go into those offices everywhere from the Senate to the police to universities to schools, all kinds of organizations. And instead of doing teaching where we were just hammering them with information, we had 2 or 3 core values that we would sit with them for a few hours.
Mm-hmm.
And we would facilitate them to really identify what does that mean to them and how to implement that in their life.
Yeah.
And it was powerful to see how much transformation and shifts that would take on the inside when they would say, my goodness, I can be this person. And this is who I want to be.
Mm-hmm.
And making that intentional decision to say, this is how I want to show up in the world.
Yeah.
So I think that's the most foundational part right there.
I love it. I love it. And completely agree about core values and establishing them. You mentioned significance, early on in your that's sort of what you used to realize that you may not have been fulfilling yourself and what you were supposed to be doing. And it's funny that you say that because significance is actually our first core value. Find significance. We want to make everyone in our lives feel significant. So we invest in multifamily real estate. So all of the members of our communities, we want them to feel, significant. We want to, pass on that feeling to make sure that, they know that they are heard, which is not necessarily something that a lot of, typical tenants would normally feel in that given situation. So we actually named our company Significant out of that. So
I love that.
So we when we were going through and doing our core values, the first core value was significant. We want everyone to feel significant. So we thought, okay, that's going to be a great name for our company. So we started laying out the logo, and I was using the scripted font, and all I could see was "I can't" at the end. So I was like, well, that doesn't work. So let's get rid of the T to become I can. So we became significant. So yeah, so significance, like as
Oh,
soon as you started talking about
yes.
significance, I was like, oh, this is, I could feel this. This is exactly me too. So yeah,
Yeah. Oh, that is, how original is that? That's
yeah,
just so much fun.
yeah.
I
It's
love that.
and it's that shift, that transformation. Like once we had that name, right,
Mhm,
or that core value, everything sort of fell in place, after that. And it
mhm,
does impact so many of your decisions, and
mhm,
attracting other people into your company. It
mhm.
impacts your culture and make sure that everybody else is aligned with these core values, and that it's just hugely
It's
important.
huge.
Yeah. So
So
in your
huge.
in your teachings and that,
Mhm,
what types of transformations have you seen in companies that may have been around for a while, and maybe they went
mhm,
through a core value
mhm,
exercise, but it wasn't really practiced. Maybe it was just something, we're going to go through and do this exercise, and then it was forgotten
mhm,
about after that.
mhm.
Do you have any thoughts, or experiences that come to mind of a company that was sort of in that boat, and then a company that has truly adopted it, and truly embraced their core values, and follow
Mhm.
that type of a program? Do you have any comparison
Mhm.
between those two?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the one that would be best to share. Was recently, it was actually at a doctor's office, and we did some core values, and then we also went into, and I love to talk about the communication piece because, as we both know, the number one problem in every organization, whether it is church, whether it is a huge business, a school, or anywhere, the number one problem is always the same. And
Mhm.
that is that people aren't getting along with each other. And there's
Yeah.
unmet expectations because perceptions are different. So kind of two pieces to that. And we went in and we held some of that transformation kind of roundtable experience that we have. Um, and just open it up to communication, Matt. It's just amazing how many people hold everything inside and they think that what they're thinking is how others should be on the same
Mhm. Mhm.
page. And it's just not. And so you just kind of have to open it up and create a safe environment that was like, wow. So I never, it's funny, like that opening question that you had. One of my favorite opening questions is when we're in a business is, share something about yourself that nobody else in here
Yeah.
knows.
Yep.
And I mean, they were just, it was amazing. It's amazing to start out like that.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, these are just real people. This,
Yeah.
it just isn't about a task and goals that we have to accomplish every day. This is about real people with real dreams and real visions. But the doctor's office, so we did that. And, one of the core values was just listening. And so we had them practice that and break into groups and then make some affirmations. And then we followed up with them. And then on top of that, and I don't know if we want to segue there, but we also did like 2 hours of them understanding their traits and
Mhm.
their strengths,
Mhm.
their needs of what they needed from the people around them, because it's complete, every person is different.
Yeah.
And we went back about a month later, and I tell you what, they scheduled like 10 more sessions after that, because we can't, until we're aware of something, can we walk in it?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so for me, it's not about going in there and saying, okay, we're going to change your culture today. It's about how do we take something and really have practical steps to walk it out for a period of time? Because I tell people, I mean, sit down and identify your top core values.
Mhm.
Is that your faith? Is it your family? Is it listening? Is it joy, peace?
Mhm.
Is it integrity? And, everyone says, well, these look good on paper, and they'll see it as a mission statement on a wall. But as far as really taking ownership to be that person, so they did like listening for a month, and it was incredible the shift that they had in their environment.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I so believe in taking bite-sized things and executing it for a while and then going
Mhm.
to the next thing.
Mhm.
Um, especially as an entrepreneur, you're trying to wear so many hats, but and that's another talk, but there are a lot of things that we need to let go of and then focus on, what's really key here. So.
And along those lines, I'm just curious, because I suffer with this all the time of, too many hats, so many different things. And I'm trying to be present for everyone, in our company. And, if someone has a question, problem, or anything like that, I'm going to jump in and I'll be that person that they can talk to, lean on, get advice from, or, I might even just direct them, hey, this person is going to be the person that's going to have the answer for you. They'll be able to help you. Talk a little bit about what that looks like to, determine what is important, what's not important, and how to focus your attention on, those things that are important.
Yeah. Even recently, because I so get that.
Yeah.
Because there's so many good things in the world to do.
Yeah, exactly.
And you've heard that, though. It's like really learning. To me, as a woman of faith, it's like, but as you've heard the cliche, letting go of the good so that you can grab onto the great. But man, what does that look like every day?
Exactly.
And so there's 4 strategies that I love to share with everyone. And when they're trying to, when I say take action on what's in your heart and taking that leap of faith. But the one that comes to me, Matt, when I was saying, when I reinvented my life, that we're only as good as the questions that we ask ourselves, right? But one of them is that when we are making decisions, whether that be in relationships or whether that be in business, whatever is going on, we often asking ourselves, well, how long is this going to take if I do this? And that is a fair question. But I think a better question is not about, okay, so asking that, so I'm going 4 different directions, is not how long is this going to take, but it's how good can I become in whatever I'm doing. So if I'm having a conversation, if I'm taking a business, it would be, how good can I get if I do this? But also asking ourselves, like you're saying, should or shouldn't I do this? Is this right or wrong, good or bad? Oftentimes, those are not good questions. And that's because there are lots of reasons why you and I should do some things, and I'll think about a question or something will come on my plate and I'll be like, I don't know, should I or shouldn't I? And I'll go crazy, with those kind of things. But what I tell people is the only question that you should be asking yourself, in that moment with whatever comes to you is this: if I say yes to this person or yes to this opportunity, is it worth my one life? And will it move me closer to my dreams? Because, just like even today, and even you doing this podcast, lots of reasons why I should be here and lots of reasons why I shouldn't. But being here with you moves me closer to my dreams because I am passionate about getting people closer to theirs. And so every day I probably use that question because so many things come and I'm like, if I say yes to that, then there's no way I'll be doing what I know that I was called to do,
Yeah.
So that was a long answer to your short question.
That's fantastic. And I mean, it is so difficult to be able to determine, what you should do or shouldn't do. And I really like the mindset of, how good is this going to make me? Is this going to, put me closer to whatever that dream is? And obviously you have to know what your dreams are in order to be able to determine, should or shouldn't you? So that kind of gets back right to your framework of, defining that first so that you can, be able to make those decisions, as you're progressing.
Your core values, right?
Exactly.
I mean, and your core values. So they're really interlocked right there. One of my core values is joy, because I know a lot of times on this journey that we have opportunities that, oh my God, this is going to be hard. And I know it's going to be hard, but I choose joy no matter what, because I know I'm growing. I know it's going to be good, but there are also things that people may ask me to do or be a part of that, I know, you know what, that's really going to challenge me in this
Yeah.
area.
Yeah.
And I'm just not in alignment. So
Yeah. And do you go through, if someone puts an opportunity, across your table, will you kind of go down through your list of core values and, just go through and sort of, mentally check off, yeah, it would help that, it would help that, it would help that, and more or less qualify that opportunity or whatever that is. Is that how you would approach, different situations sort of as a first
absolutely.
precursor? Yeah.
Absolutely. When I was in the corporate world, and in sales for one specific organization, Matt, I mean, they would ask us to do some things that were not ethical to me.
Hmm.
And so
Hmm.
epic integrity is one of my core values.
Yeah.
So I think it happens and when you're living it and it becomes a part of you, real quickly, you can hammer out a yes or no.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Depending on what that is. Or, if I have a group of friends and they say, hey, we're going here tonight. You want to join us? You don't have to drink, da, da, da. I'm like, no,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's not in alignment with who I am.
Yeah.
So, and I don't want to be a stumbling block. So mine are probably a lot tighter than most people,
Yeah.
but that's just who I am. And I
I
don't
love
put
it.
that on, but those are my values.
Yeah.
So
I
yeah,
love it. I love it.
yeah.
So talk a little bit about what you do. You mentioned that you travel with John Maxwell and talk a
Mhm.
little bit about, what you do day in and day out.
Right. So my husband and I, we're on faculty for the John Maxwell team. So we train and speak into the lives of over 40,000 coaches, speakers, and trainers internationally. So we've been doing that for the past several years and absolutely love it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like they're our tribe and they're our people. But we also are seeing how we need to move out more. And so we have a company called Telesco Leadership. So we do that. And then we also have, like you, a lot of hats.
Hmm. Hmm.
We have Telesco Leadership Group. And my husband is the coaches of coaches, Matt. He could do that all day long, every day.
Yeah.
He's just takes people to another level. Me, I do more of the speaking and the training.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
love to speak into the lives of people, more from, just different platforms.
Hmm.
So we had that collaboration that we get to do that together.
Yeah.
So that, and then I'm getting ready to launch a women's ministry because I love leadership,
Yeah.
but my heartbeat is ministry.
Okay.
And so that's a huge, huge part of what I do too.
I love it. I love it. And so with being exposed to so many different people, again, we touched on this
Mhm.
earlier, so many different people in so many different situations, so many different types of companies. What would you say seems to be a common stumbling block for a lot of people? Obviously we've touched
Mhm.
on all of the the core values and all of that. Would you say that that's the biggest stumbling block, or is there something else that sort of gets in the way and
Mhm.
might stop someone from becoming the person that they're supposed to be, or maybe even taking the first step in that direction? Maybe they're
Yeah.
they're thinking about doing something, but they're just not even sure about moving forward at all. Does anything come to mind
Yeah.
as far as that? What common?
Matt, well, for me, myself, and I actually think for most people is they may have a vision or an idea, but bigger than that, it's just that belief in themselves,
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
belief that, what, could I really do this? Could I really, really pull this off?
Hmm.
And and I knew for years that God had a special call and that it was going to be speaking, but I was terrified,
Any detail?
terrified of it.
Yeah.
And so, oh my, it was awful. I could tell you stories. It was awful. And so, but you know what? Still, there was something inside of me that was much bigger. And it
Hmm.
was really, one of my favorite, I like to tell people, it's not who you believe in that changes your life forever, but who believes in you.
Hmm.
And I was surrounded by people who believed in me. And I'm so grateful for that. Not that you have to have that, but I highly encourage you
Yeah. Yeah.
to that core group of people is huge, you know. But I think the biggest one is just the belief.
Mhm.
And the way that I love to encourage people, because that biggest gap that we have in all our lives, is that gap between knowing and doing,
Yeah.
and just executing and taking a step. And that I like to home in on those. And so I share those strategies with everyone, because that's what's going to help you cross that threshold of fear. Because the biggest enemies of your life and my life are procrastination, perfectionism, and comparison.
Mhm.
And if we don't go after them with a vengeance, when all those thoughts come in our head, I mean, they'll abort our dreams before we get started.
Yeah.
So I'm a big person on execution and doing it afraid. And I'm sure that's a common theme that's woven with a lot of entrepreneurs, but
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I
Mhm.
think that a lot of people, I don't think I've ever really heard it put that way, but I can absolutely identify with all three of those stumbling blocks.
Oh,
You're always trying to talk yourself out of it, like, maybe that's not a good idea, and maybe I shouldn't do this.
yes.
But you never know until you try. And it's actually interesting too, now that we're kind of talking about this.
Mhm.
I wonder if there's something, I think as entrepreneurs, maybe if this is your first step, this might not necessarily
Mhm.
apply to you, but as an entrepreneur, I think we're always sort of testing the waters and sort of pushing the boundaries, here and there. And I'm
Mhm.
curious if you've seen any, I guess, type of correlation where people sort of find their own path, their own way to, sort of, I guess, start
Mhm.
breaking down the wall, because maybe
Mhm.
something in their personality says, I'm 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 good at this, so I'm going to go in this way, and kind of start
Mhm.
knocking my hole through the wall
Yes.
right there. And then it sort of blows up from there. And I don't even know what my question is with all of that, but it
Yeah.
just sort of resonated
Yes.
with me that I never really looked at it that way, but you kind of start honing in on something and just chiseling away, and then all of a sudden it
Yeah.
kind of just blows up. So I don't know,
Yes.
I don't even know what the question is, but does that resonate?
Oh, Matt, so much, so much. Because the first thing, because when I did understand my natural strengths and traits, what
Mhm.
I what I learned from that was that, you know what, I need to quit trying to grow in all these areas that I'll never be good at,
Yeah.
and surround myself with people, who my weaknesses are their playground. So that was one thing to relinquish.
Mhm.
But the other thing that really comes to me, that I encourage myself every day and other people, is to start small and messy.
Yeah.
You know what? Create your path of how you do things. There is no cut and dry. And, being in leadership and personal development, holy cow, there are so many things that are every day. Somebody has a new way that you need to do something.
Yeah.
Somebody has
Yeah.
a new strategy. Somebody is trying to sell you something. And you have to come to that place that I really think, if you'll just listen, number one is just to listen to that voice in your heart. I
Mhm.
call it the nudge, and it will tell you, is this a yes or a
The
no? Do I
nudge.
go this way? And does
Yeah.
that path work for me? Because I mean, there are so many people that say, you know what, y'all should do this, 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 and this. And I'm like going, something inside of me. I mean, how many times have Tom and I made investments because it was the next big shiny thing? And I tell you what, that it was not good stewardship.
Mhm. Mhm.
But as I practiced and I thought, wow, when I really look back, something inside of me said, do not do that. And I didn't listen. And you know
Mhm.
what? We just learned that from practicing listening inside. But the other piece of that is, oh my goodness, is really giving, kind of the paradox is to giving yourself permission to mess up and make mistakes
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
say, you know what, that and that is something I wasn't real good at. So what would happen is that fear of perfectionism or
Mhm.
whatever that would be, I wouldn't make a decision, or I wouldn't move forward in fear of making a mistake. And I was making a decision not to do anything.
Yeah.
And it held me
Yeah.
back further. And,
Yeah.
and you've heard it a million times that we will learn more from our mistakes than we ever will from our
It's
failures.
absolutely true. Yeah.
And
It's
that
absolutely
is
true.
okay.
Yeah.
That's how we're going to do it. And but yeah, that's a huge one. I think starting small and messy, and just freeing yourself up to do that, it's huge.
Mhm. And you might draw on your own personal outlook here, but Do you feel like there is a disposition for people to not want to mess up because they're personally afraid that it's going to mess up their own life? Or do you feel like it's that people are more afraid that people are going to look at me differently if I mess that up? Right. So it's,
Right.
is it
Right.
everybody else that's going to come down on me, or is it because I truly feel like I may not be able to recover from that, or it's going to really hurt me if it
Yeah.
doesn't go well? Any thoughts
I
there?
think absolutely. And I think a lot of that too has to do with our wiring. For certain personalities, it will be, oh my goodness, if I mess up or if I botch this up, I'm going to be rejected. And
Yeah.
that's huge. That's like, because that fuel and that need system is, I need to be accepted.
Yeah.
Another one might say, oh my goodness, if I mess up, because their identity is so in getting everything right and perfect, it's not so much about the people, but they find a lot of their own self-worth in doing things with such excellence and sterling precision that it challenges their self-worth. So when you understand the personalities, you understand that the motivations and the stress points are a little bit different. But either way, they're all rooted in fear, Matt.
Yeah.
And that's what I hate, fear, because fear is what's holding us back from really pushing forward and crossing those limits. When I knew that I wanted to speak, and I was I had a Sunday school group when my parents pastored. It was a cowboy church, and I had the youth. Man, I remember driving an hour and a half every Sunday. We drove an hour and a half to get there.
Yeah.
I would be sweating bullets. They were 8 to 18, all in the same room of this old portable building. And before we would get there, I just would be sweating. I would be going over what I was going to say. It was awful. And this was just a group of country kids from nowhere.
Yeah.
And that fear, but I showed up every week, and it just began to tear down the walls. And when I joined the John Maxwell team and I saw my first motivational speaker, his name was Nick Boych, and he had no arms, no legs.
Oh,
and
I think I know him. Yeah. Or I think I've heard of him. Yeah.
I love Nick.
Yeah.
He was the first speaker, motivational speaker I'd really ever heard. And when I saw him, my heart leaped. I said, that's what I want to do the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And this opportunity came up to be on stage with John Maxwell. It was like a 10-month process before Tom and I were on faculty. This is years back. And I knew I had to go all in, and it was scary, but by golly, if I was not chosen out of over 100 people of top 5 to speak on stage with John Maxwell in front of 3,000 people, my first time to speak.
Yeah.
And so
that's fantastic.
It was so scary.
Yeah.
But you know what? It changed my whole life.
Yeah,
it changed everything.
Yeah. Looking back on that, I'm sure that was the pivotal point that really, you probably blossomed after that. You got over so many fears, and I can do this. And you had your own self. You've proven to yourself that you can do this, and the competitive side of things, you beat everybody else out. So yeah, that was a huge, I'm sure that was a huge step forward for you. This is fantastic.
It was. And so and it could be that it's going to be something different from everyone, but you just have to start. You just have to go, because we're never ready.
I completely,
you're never ready.
That's the thing that everybody needs to realize, is that there's never going to be the right time. There's never going to be, everything's not going to fall in a line, perfect to make that step forward. You just, like you said, you just got to get out and do it. Yeah. I love it. Yeah. Tonya, this has been fantastic. If people want to learn more about you, your services, how would they reach out and get in touch?
Sure. Absolutely. Website is TonyaTelesco.com. So made it simple. Also, Matt, there is a free download on there. It's called Ignite Your Passion Guide. And so for people who are maybe looking for clarity and really, how, because I often say that people are overwhelmed because they're underpurposed. Not that they don't have a lot of stuff to do, but they just haven't got clarity of what is that one thing. So really understanding the different types of passions and how to pinpoint what brings you alive. This little that little download will help you get started. So
I love it.
that's available on there. But yeah, TonyaTelesco.com.
Love it. Love it. Tonya, thank you for the time, the insights, and keep changing
Yes.
people's lives, keep impacting people, which I know you will do.
You
So
too. Thank you,
congratulations.
Matt.